Hi, I'm Elizabeth, the Foster Care and Community Engagement Coordinator with Marion County Children's Services. And here with me today for our episode on our podcast on adoption, I have Carrie Grogan. And so Carrie, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Carrie Grogan. I'm the placement supervisor here with Marion County Children's Services. I've been the placement supervisor for about 2 years. I have experience at Children's Services for about 10 years now. I've done intake, ongoing, and now placement, and so that's where I've landed.
Great. So you bring a lot of wealth of knowledge to the table and to your role. So we really appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right into this topic. I know that this is a topic that some people have anxiously awaiting us talking about. We did talk about foster care last time, and some of what we do in foster care is mirrored in adoption, at least in the process. So would you mind talking a little bit about the training, the application, and the home study process for us?
Sure. So before you can become licensed to foster or adopt, you have to take what we call a pre-service training. So the pre-service training is about 12 sessions. Marion County offers it twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. So after you complete the pre-service training successfully, then you complete an application. The application is a lengthy process. There's a lot of paperwork involved, but it's to ensure that the prospective foster adoptive parents are ready to take on the challenge that they're getting themselves into. Yes. So after the application is complete, then they're assigned a caseworker that goes out and does an extensive home study, and then they kind of go from there, and then we complete the certification process.
Great. So one of the themes that I feel like we just heard a lot, as well as we talked about last week, is extensive. So we're really obviously hoping that we get to know the family a lot and that they also get to know the process, right?
Yes.
Because there's a lot to it. And then we say ready in quotes because are you ever really ready?
I don't think so.
Are you ever really ready to be a parent in general?
That is true. There's never the right time. So.
Yeah. So can you also talk a little bit about the difference and maybe how it looks for licensing foster compared to adoption? Like, can you adopt only? Can you do a license to adopt only? Like, how does that look at our agency?
At our agency, we rarely do license to adopt only. We like to do the foster to adopt. That way, there's a bond set and there's that experience that you have with that child. So typically, we do a foster license and an adoption license congruently. So we do them all at the same time. And then you're duly licensed, so then you can foster your children and adopt them if it gets to that point.
So one of the calls that I feel like I take a lot is someone who wants to call and they are only interested in adopting. So how often do we know if we're going to be able to have a child readily available for this family?
So we never know that really until it happens. We can't predict the outcome of a case until it happens. Our goal is always reunification with the family. So to be able to predict that is very difficult. So we can't ever place a child with a family at the beginning and say, oh, this is going to be an adoption case. Don't worry about it. It's never guaranteed. So it's one of those where you do the fostering, and then if it gets to that point, and the big word is if it gets to that point, then you can start moving forward with that process.
Okay. So I know that we have talked a little bit too about the role that kinship and family and everything plays. And one of the things that I would just like people who are out there listening to know is, we obviously are trying to do as much of that at the beginning of a case. The other thing that I try to prep, prospective foster and adoptive parents on is that there can be a lot of heartache in it. It can be a very difficult thing to experience, but, and there's the big but, there's the other side of that is that obviously we're hoping that we're getting that child back into a safe situation with their family, and that during that time that a foster and even prospective adoptive family had been providing a safe and loving environment for this child. So I think it's really hard to talk about adoption and not talk about fostering when it comes to our agency.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand to a certain extent.
Right. So you've already kind of touched a little bit on this, but when a child is placed in an adoptive home, do they just get adopted and that's it, or what happens? How does all of that work, like leading up to the adoption?
Well, one of the requirements that there are is that the child has to be in the home for 6 months. So if you fostered the child for, say, a year or 2 years, something like that, then that requirement is already met. If we are placing a child in a home where they haven't been in there, they have to be there for 6 months to kind of give a trial period. There's always a honeymoon period, and we want to make sure that that honeymoon period kind of passes and make sure it's a good fit, and that, when reality hits, that everything's going to be okay. So you have that kind of 6-month trial period. There's also discussions where we have to speak about subsidies. There's legal paperwork that has to be done, those types of things. So once the child is placed in the home, there are some more steps that have to be taken that aren't taken, obviously, with a foster home.
Okay. So you've already started kind of talking a little bit too on subsidies. Can you talk about like the adoption interview process, and then not necessarily all the subsidy negotiations, but kind of how we get to that point, and then what happens after a family adopts, and maybe there's needed services after that?
So when a prospective adoptive family is identified, they are matched with the child. So once the family is matched, then they're able to go through the adoption interview, is where we make sure that it's a good fit. We document all of the special needs that the child has, and make sure that the family is fit to meet those needs. As far as the adoption subsidy goes, that is based on the child's special needs. So that's something that the agency and medical professionals, mental health professionals help determine. And so then there's a negotiation process that goes into finding a subsidy amount for a family to go along with the adoption. After the adoption is final, there's also financial support for families that have adopted, called post-adoption support services. So that's financial assistance that the family can apply for in certain instances, that the family can use to help with those special needs if they become progressively worse, or if there's a new special need that pops up or something like that.
So you have said a lot about special needs, and this is kind of on the spot, I guess, but can you expand a little bit on what some special needs kids in foster care who are getting adopted out of foster care might display?
Yeah, special needs aren't always the typical special needs that you would think of. They can be a part of a sibling group if they've been in custody for over a certain number of days. That's considered a special need. If they've had more than a certain number of placement disruptions, that's considered a special need. So there are other special needs, but then there are those typical special needs that we talk about, such as the mental health issues that the children have. Some of them have special medical issues that need extra care, that aren't covered by typical insurance and things like that, that you need that extra support for.
So you also just said another word that I feel like we should kind of talk about. So
Sure.
Insurance?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like for some of our kids that get adopted out of foster care?
So the kids that are adopted out of foster care are eligible for the medical card. So what we look at when we look at special needs and adoption subsidies are those expenses that aren't necessarily covered by the medical card. Now, you can cover your child under your private family insurance. That's your decision. But most of the children that are adopted do come with the medical card. So there's that insurance, and the subsidy would cover some of those items that aren't necessarily covered by insurance or the medical card.
So you just talked a lot about some supports that our agency does. Obviously, we've talked about the special needs that some of these kids had. And like you said, it's not traditionally what we might think of as special needs, but all of our kids have been traumatized. And I mean, that's just the honest truth, laying it out. Can you talk about maybe some of the supports in the community that we might link a family with that they can utilize then, down the road even?
Sure. Yeah, we can link to Family and Children First Council. We do that a lot. The Board of Developmental Disabilities, we link to them a lot as well. And just those church supports, those different types of things as well.
Community stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of community. We really, I don't think we can stress enough in like the community engagement podcast that we use our community and we love the resources that are available, and we really look towards them a lot for our families, not just our adoptive families, but also our bio families and foster families. So this is a great time to kind of discuss one really big thing. Are there kids in foster care who are waiting to be adopted?
There are.
Okay. And then can you give us like some just brief information on what that might look like, the process, and I don't know, we didn't really discuss like maybe talking about ages, genders, you know, and where they could find some information?
Yes, so the children are listed on some websites that you probably have more details about.
I'll link it down below.
Yay! So they are listed on some websites, and then you can contact either the caseworkers or Elizabeth to get more information about those children and then what the process is. The process would be similar to becoming in a foster and to adopt family, the pre-service classes, the application, that type of thing to become licensed to adopt that child if you are interested. But you can always call us for more information about any of the children that are listed.
That's awesome. So one thing I just want to make sure that people know, and I mean, I'm going to brag on our agency a little bit. I think one of the reasons that if you're interested in being an adoptive parent, that it's a good idea to come through us is that you have that support of those placement caseworkers while you're fostering also. Obviously, there are private agencies out there. If you are already in a licensed adoptive home and you're interested in learning more about any of our kiddos, we will put that information and link it here so that you can find out more about our kids that are waiting on their forever families. And if you feel that tug on your heartstrings and you're not currently licensed, feel free to give me a call and we can go through some of that stuff. So I really hope that my supervisor knows that there is a super secret question that I typically ask, you know, in the podcast. We have a couple of variations out there now. So what I do, have you watched my podcast?
I have.
Okay, great. So what I'll do is ask you the question. I will talk for a minute because everyone just loves to hear from me, and then we'll come back. So I'll give you a little bit of time to kind of think about this. So why did you choose this field? What is it that kind of drew you to maybe like the field of social work, but more specifically child welfare? So you can think about that for a second.
Okay.
Once again, I just want to touch on the fact that if you have any questions on how to become a licensed foster or adoptive parent, hopefully both, then feel free to contact me. You can find our information on Facebook. We're also on LinkedIn, of course, our website, and you can just shoot me an email and we can chat and I can give you lots of information, probably too much information because a lot of it is just a little overwhelming, but that's why we're here to support you and answer any questions that you might have. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, so why did you choose this field and more specifically like child welfare?
So I love kids. I've always wanted to work with kids. But in taking social work classes and going through all of the social work lessons, you learn that it's not just the kiddos that you have to work with, it's the families. And I truly believe that it does take a village to raise a child, and I do really feel like being a part of this team helps me be a big part of that village. And I just want to do what I can. I want to do my part to help raise good kids and kids that have bright futures. And so I think that being here in child welfare, it gives me the ability to at least do my part to do that.
That's awesome. And I will say, like, you just said a few things that I think that it, you know, I think I'd love for the community to know when, especially our unit, but that's who I interact with most, obviously. When we talk about the kids of Marion, we are talking about our kids. And, you know, so we really do have this passion and this desire to just serve the community. So that about does it for us. If you have any questions, once again, please feel free to contact me. And we are so thankful that you watched, and have a great day.